Okay, I'll just check that you guys can hear all right. How's the sound for you guys? You okay for sound? Good? What about you guys at the back? You okay for sound up there? No? You want more power? More power. How's that? Is that better? Is it better? Okay. What about you guys? You okay for sound? Good. Right. Is it time? I'll say it is. Okay, so today we're going to start the course in earnest, and what we're going to do for today and tomorrow is basically have an overview of the entire financial system. So, this is like the very high-level view of the financial system, and then we'll basically go back and start at the beginning again and work through in a little bit more detail. The thing about this course is it's very broad, with very little depth in any particular topic. So there's a lot of topics, but not a lot of depth. So the financial system that we have today has grown up over a very long period of time. In fact, it's grown up over a number of centuries, and it's grown up in a very haphazard fashion. There is no way that you can say that this system that we have has been designed. If you say compare that with a brand new aircraft, the financial system is not designed in the sense that an aircraft is designed. If you think about an airplane, when that one's rolled out in the factory, the number one's rolled out of the factory, eventually test pilot gets in there, rolls down the runway and flies off, that plane almost always flies exactly how they think it should. And the reason for that is that the science of aerodynamics is well understood, the problems of engineering, developing control systems, what sort of airfoils you stick on the wings, how much thrust you need to those engines, and all that stuff is very well understood. And if there are problems, or you think there may be problems, often you have the option of building a model, or maybe sometimes even a full-scale mock-up, stick it in a wind tunnel, and test it during the design phase so that you know how this aircraft is going to behave. The financial system is nothing like that at all. If it's like anything at all, it's like evolution. If you remember back to your high school biology, remember that living creatures respond to the environment they're in. They change, they develop, they grow, some go extinct, and change is happening all the time. That is the sort of change and development we see in the financial system. When a change takes place in the financial system, the system is fully operational, it's going, and you change it on a live system. There's no chance for you to go out and test it on something like a wind tunnel. There's no financial wind tunnel. You can go test on it. You've got to put it into the actual live running system. And so this creates a lot of problems for us because, sometimes you put things in and don't work. Now, if you think about how the system has developed over several centuries, there's been two main driving forces behind it. One is someone, either an individual or a corporation, has seen the opportunity for a new financial product or new financial service that they could put in at profit to themselves. If they are right about that it's profitable, then it becomes a normal part of the financial system. In the same vein, some things become obsolete and they simply wither and die and they go out of existence. The other main driving force in the financial system is financial crises, of which we have an unending supply. When you get one, and they occur regularly, often the responses are required urgently, there are serious time constraints, and you don't have a lot of time to think about what on earth you should do because you're pressed into making a response very quickly because the situation demands that you respond, and you just simply have to do the best you can in the situation you find yourselves in. Now, often, when you get in those situations, there's enormous amounts of debate about what you should do. These debates go on very vigorously. They often become acrimonious. People disagree about what should be done. And even once a decision is actually made and something is done, there's usually a big group of people who said that was the wrong thing to do, that they know better, you should have done it this way. And the reason that things aren't going well today is because you didn't follow our advice back then. The fact that there is this enormous amount of disagreement going on, and it goes on almost continually in the financial system, shows us that the questions we might want to ask about the financial system in terms of growing our understanding of it, they might not have clear answers. And two, even where answers are given, they may be no more than someone's educated guess. So when you see, say, read something in a textbook about financial system, this is not necessarily clear, factual stuff. A lot of this is an opinion, and you may choose to disagree with the opinions that you see. But you need to think about what you see, what you read, and decide whether you actually agree, and if you disagree, why you disagree with it. Now, if you think back to the example of the financial system being like a system that evolves over time, if you think what evolution does, it tends to produce things that work okay, but we know in many cases that the particular solution that evolution has come up with is actually suboptimal. And it may well be that the way our financial system is functioning at the moment is not functioning in an optimal manner. There may be better ways of doing things out there, and maybe someday people will find them and improve the system. But just like evolution, most of the time, the financial system seems to work reasonably well. It doesn't work well all the time. It periodically has major problems. But most of the times, it seems to do what we would like it to do. Now, if you've taken other courses in either finance or economics, you'll probably have come across people who place great emphasis on the value of the raising of capital and the free financial markets to advance the welfare of a nation and its particular peoples. Now, in one sense, there's a lot of truth in that. But there's also a second thing to consider about that, is that financial systems, they tend to grow and die with the civilizations they serve. And if you take, it doesn't matter what civilization you look at, when a civilization develops, some sort of financial system develops with that civilization. When that civilization dies, the financial system dies with it. If you take, for example, Egypt, Egypt went through a number of periods in its thousands of years of history where it had great flowering of civilization. You see the pyramids and many other monuments built in those times when Egypt was flourishing. And then there was times when what we call very euphemistically intermediate periods where the thing crumbled away. And when the thing developed, when the civilization was flowering, the financial systems in there, primitive though it may be compared to ours, it grew up at the same time. It grew up with it. Now, the reason that the Egyptian civilization went through these periods of flowering and then crumbling away had to do with the East African monsoon. It would come in, rain up in the highlands, the Nile would flood, replenish the fertility of the soil, provide water, they'd grow lots of food, and when that was happening, things were great. But periodically, on the scale of centuries, that monsoon would weaken, and the rains would be infrequent. The Nile would not flood in the manner that they'd grown accustomed to. They could not grow as much food. The civilization crumbled away. And the financial system crumbled away with it. But the point is, no financial system could have saved them from that. At best, a financial system will facilitate the growth and development of an economy and the improvement of the welfare of peoples, but in and of itself, it can't stop a decay that sets in. At worst, as we've seen in many of these crises, sometimes the financial system can actually make things worse on its own without actually extra help from other people. So that's a broad introduction to the financial system. So we'll make a little progress here, and we'll start off with this little thing here. This is a quote from a novel. This is David Copperfield, written by Charles Dickens. And in the context of that novel, this guy, Wilkins McCawber, he makes this comment. He says, annual income, £20. Actually, that's not very much money. But anyway, in those days it was. Annual expenditure, £19, 19 and 6. Result, happiness. Annual income, £20. Annual expenditure, £20, 0 and 6. Result, misery. Now, even if you don't understand the British system of the pounds and the shillings and the pence, you can look at those numbers and realize what's happening. There are people who are in the happy position. They are actually earning, they have more income than they're spending. So what they would like to do with that extra that they're not spending right now is they want to save that, they want to invest that, they want to get a return on that, so that in the future they'll be even better off than they are now. On the other side, there are people who are expending more than they're earning. That may be individuals, it may be corporations, it may be governments. And in that unfortunate position, you need to be able to raise funds from somewhere by borrowing or some other mechanism. And this is a little problem here. Some people have too much. They want to save and invest. Other people don't have enough. They want to borrow. This is what drives an enormous amount of the financial system, this little problem right here. Now, that little problem right there also applies to nations as well as to individuals. And we can look around the world and see countries like Greece that lived beyond its means for far too long. Eventually, the system fell over, and great misery came to the people that lived under that system. So moving on. First question up. What are the roles of the financial system, and why is it important to the economy to have an efficient, effective financial system? So when we're thinking about financial system, what are its roles? What do we want this thing to do for us? Any ideas?
We want to prosper. We want the financial system to make our country better.
Okay, so as an end result, you want the whole system to work in such a way that we prosper materially. Okay, so that's an end result. That's what we want. How are we going to get there? What do we need that financial system to do to get the end result we want? Any ideas of what that system's got to do for us to get the result that we want? Because, I mean, although not everybody in the world thinks we need economic growth and prosperity, most people think that's a good thing. Any ideas?
Facilitate transactions.
Facilitate transactions. What's that mean?
So it allows the transfer of money from one party to another. So if you have more than you need, you can go to something less than you need.
Okay, so there's one key thing we want to do. We want to actually move money between people, particularly those who have surplus that need to invest. We want them to be able to move money to those that don't have enough. And any other sort of transactions that go on. You know, even from things like buying your lunch to buying a house, we want it to do that. We want it to do these transactions for us. Anything else we want the system to do, or would like the system to do? Need the system to do? Any ideas? No. I can tell the answer is no. No. Okay. I just plain be a Jedi. Anyway. Anyone else? Do you have any ideas? Allocate money efficiently. What do you mean by that?
It just goes to where it needs to be. Like, the people who need the money get it, and people who can make it give it to those people.
Okay, so you want it to allocate efficiently in the sense of it's going to earn a high return. Is that fair? Okay. Yeah, that's some things we want it to do. So let me turn my slide over a bit. There's actually 5 things we want it to do. The top one, to facilitate the flow of funds. We talked about that. That was your good point there. Several other things. Settle transaction, fairly obvious what that is. What about this one here about generate and disseminate information? Why do we want our financial system to do that? Efficient in what sense? How does it do that? Okay, I mean, you're on the right track, but how does it do it?
Just taking the correct information, just help people make the right decision to invest and also.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. If you've got to make a decision about investment, you need good information to do that. So we want our system to do that. 4th thing there, one that provides the means to transfer and manage risk. Quite important. And then there's 5th one, ways to be dealing with these incentive problems. Now, if you look at how that's split up, the top one is the key one, and those next 4, points 2, 3, 4, and 5, they are there essentially to make sure that top one is done well. So these are the 5 things we want it to do. The top one's key. The next 4 essentially play a facilitating role to make sure that top one works as we would like it to work. So let's look at these in a bit more detail. So just a little terminology before we go on. There's three types of main types of economic units. There's households, businesses, and governments. In New Zealand, we have two levels of government. We have a central government, and we have local government, like city councils. Some places have three levels, like Australia does. And then there's three possible budget positions. You can either be balanced, income's exactly the same as expenditure. You can have a surplus, that's where you spend less than you earn, and the deficit, where you spend more than you earn. So those are the three budget positions. So here's a diagram. I'm not sure if this one's in your book, but anyway, here it is. If you look at the suppliers of funds on one side and the demanders of funds on the other side, you see households, businesses, governments, both sides. How can we get them on both sides of that diagram? Why would you get them on both sides? Yeah. Why would you get households on one side and households on the other side? No idea? Okay. Anybody else?
Some households will have a surplus and some households will have a deficit. So generally, families that are later in life, so your kids have moved out, you're going to save a lot more money. Whereas someone down the road might want to borrow money to buy a new house. Yeah,
good point. So basically, it simply depends on where you are in terms of your expenditure versus your income. And you may be a household that you're spending less than you earn, in which case you go over on the supplier side. If you're actually spending more than you earn, you go on the other side. The same applies to governments. Like a couple of years ago, New Zealand government was earning less than it spent, was in a budget deficit, and it would be over on the demanders of fund side. At the moment, it's running a surplus, so it switched over to the other side. So in the last 2 years, our government has switched over sides. So what's the bit in the middle, the financial markets? Anyone met financial markets of any type? A bank. A bank is not a financial market, it's a financial intermediary. Okay? Okay. Share market. A share market is definitely a type of financial market. So thinking of the share market, and you think, along the top there, they got funds going from the suppliers to the financial markets and then over to demanders. And you got on the bottom there, financial instruments going from the from the demanders to the financial markets over to the suppliers. How would a share market make that happen?
The households or someone would buy shares in a company, and the money would go to the company and keep your share certificate.
Okay, a key point there, I mean, that's right. If you buy shares in the company and the money goes to this company, you would get a share certificate. A key point there is that there's actually two types of market. There's where the money actually would go to the company itself, and we'll come to this in a few minutes. That we call the primary market. Now, there's also a secondary market, and that's when we think of stock markets, that we tend to think of, is that the money doesn't go to the issuer, it actually goes to the other investor who had it before you. So, if we're talking about the primary market, the issuing of shares, demander of fund, let's say it's Auckland International Airport, they want to build another runway, they need money, they're going to issue shares, then the suppliers of fund would buy those, and then once that is done, then those shares actually get shifted over to the share market. And so there's actually two types of markets in there. There's the primary market, and that's where the money moves from the investor, the very first investor, to the demander of the funds. That occurs in the primary market. And of course, down the bottom, the financial instrument, there's a whole range of them. In this particular example, it's a common stock that goes back. So the course is sort of split into three pieces, and this sort of corresponds to the three pieces. There's the financial markets. That's typically the middle third of the course, about the markets themselves. And typically we covered the financial instruments at the same time we talk about those markets. The bottom one there, the financial institutions, is approximately the final third of the course. And when we're talking about things like commercial banks, insurance companies, and so on in that part of the course. So here's an interesting question. This is in the book. If you got a book, it's question 1.2, page 44. you should think about this one before you answer this one. But it asks this question: does it make sense that a typical household is a surplus spending unit while a typical business firm is a deficit spending unit? Explain. So first off, does that make sense? Does it make sense? Does it make sense to you? No. Is that because you don't understand, or does it sound dumb? It sounds weird. What about it that sounds weird? Okay, I'm going to agree with you. It sounds weird.
I'm not, I guess I don't fully understand. That's probably why it's like that.
Okay, but you're in the right place to learn. Okay. You don't understand, but you're in the right place to learn. This is good. Does it make sense to you?
Sort of, yeah.
Sort of. Okay, why do you think it makes sense?
Because the typical household will have some level of savings that they're going to want to invest in maybe some shares, and the typical business is going to demand funds from the financial market through the issuing of securities to try and investment and spending. That makes sense.
Okay, so if you take the first bit, if I'll try, because most people probably didn't hear you, so I have to summarize what you said. Tell me if I summarize you incorrectly. I want to say, so for a household, it makes reasonable sense, okay, because people, they have an income, and most of them, overall, they do spend less than they earn, and so they end up with a little surplus, and hopefully they'll save that. Now, your argument is about the businesses that they need to borrow money to expand their business. Now, the problem with that, at least my view, and that's why I agree with you thinking it's weird, is that I think this poor little problem here, I think that when the authors wrote this problem, they didn't think about this carefully enough. For those of you who are doing like Finance 201 this semester, or going to go on and do corporate finance at third year, you'll talk about in some of those courses that businesses carry debt as part of their capital structure. Okay. Now, I suspect that they confuse the carrying of debt as part of their capital structure with being in deficit. Because if they're truly in deficit, that means that more cash is going out than is coming in, and that's a recipe for going bankrupt. Okay? What you want is a business that's profitable. That means more money's coming in than going out. If you're truly in a deficit, then you go bankrupt. And so I think this particular question, they didn't think about this question well enough before they wrote it down. And so, sometimes you think, I agree with you. It's weird. In fact, in the end, I think they're actually wrong. I think what we expect is that both businesses and households will be in surplus in general. Any other questions or comments on that before we move on? Well, their example is a typical business is in deficit. No, a typical business is not losing money. That's my argument. A typical business is making a profit. Yeah, I mean, your point. I think your point was the point they're looking for. So if you answered their question for them, you probably get good marks. But I think that they didn't think about it hard enough. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, go ahead.
What do you find in this typical New Zealand household to be in deficit, seeing that mostly got mortgages?
Well, that again, if you think about buying a mortgage, buying a house and getting a mortgage, okay, you borrow that money as a one-off, and then over, say, 25 years, you repay it. So the time that you're in deficit, because the S stands for spending, is actually only in the year that you buy the house. After that point, you're probably going to return to surplus, and you're using your surplus to repay the mortgage. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. As well. Okay. First up, the question: what's a financial claim? I've actually added a bit here about what's the economic purpose of financial claim. But what's a financial claim? We talk about financial claims in this course a lot. What are they? Nobody knows. Go ahead.
So it's sort of the right to something like if, like someone owes you money, you have a financial claim over there. sort of like the income kind of thing? Is that with you?
Yeah, very good. Yeah, it's simply in terms of the markets that we deal with. There's various types, okay, like a bond or common stock, and essentially a right over the other party's assets and income over time. So, what's the economic purpose? Why do we have these things? Why is our system actually grown up in such a way that these things exist? What's that?
Repeat and maybe expand on.
Oh, okay. I'll go over the next slide because it's got a little bit there on it. Okay, so the financial claims, this actually answers the next question. It says they exist to transfer the surplus spending units, their excess purchasing power, to your deficit ones. So what a financial claim is when you think about what's happening there, is that say you're in surplus and you're going to transfer this extra money that you've got, and you want to transfer it to somewhere else, to someone who needs it. And what you want from them is some sort of contract that tells you how they're going to repay that, or what sort of returns are you going to earn on it. And so that thing that comes back, whatever form that contract comes back in, whether it's, say, a bond or a mortgage or a common stock, and there's a whole range of these things, these are the things we call financial claims. And they exist so that there's a contract between you, who supplied the money, and the corporation or the individual who borrowed that money, and how they're going to repay you. And it takes all sorts of forms, but there's this big collection of stuff, money market securities, bonds, equities, all that sort of stuff. All of them are financial claims. Okay. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Right. Any other questions? Okay. I think the top one there explains why we have these things. It's to transfer that money over to those who need it. Now, typically, we can split them into two major groups. There's debt, that's like making a loan, and then there's the equities. Now, a debt is simply someone has borrowed your money. If you are the investor, you've made the loan. The person at the other end, or the corporation, has borrowed your money, and that is a debt. And that's one of the major ways in which this transfer takes place. The other major way is through equity, which there's several forms of equity. Common stock, preferred stock are the two main ones. And basically, in that particular case, you're not making a loan. You're actually buying an ownership stake in the company that is issuing the shares. So, for example, if a company wanted to raise more money, say Fletcher Building wanted to raise more money to go about an expansion, and you bought those shares, what you're doing, even though you're transferring the money over to them exactly the same way that you would in issuing of debt, you are buying an ownership stake in Fletcher Building when you do that. And so there's two ways that you earn a return. In a debt, you will get interest. If you buy an equity, you hope that the company that you bought shares in will increase its value, and so you'll get capital appreciation of your shares, but you're also entitled to a portion of the profits that they make, and those are paid out to you in the form of dividends. And we've got two major markets, some debt that we cover, and then also the equities as in the stock markets. So there's another function of the financial system, settlement of transactions. So when these transactions take place, whether it's a financial transaction like the buying and selling of shares, whether it's paying for your book, textbooks, buying lunch, whatever, we want this system to make this go for us smoothly. And the thing that does that, or the big system within it, is called the payment system. We'll deal with this a bit later in some of the other sections. Okay. Now, this is sort of return to a question we asked before, but why is the generation and dissemination of information important within the financial system? Why do we want this information generated in the first place? Why do we want it to be spread around? Yeah, go ahead.
So people can make informed decisions?
Yeah, it's to make informed decisions. In what way informed? About what?
So, like, if they're wanting to buy stocks or something like that, they know about the company they're buying in, and they can make it so that they know what they're getting into.
Okay, so you want to know about the company, its business, what it's doing, all that sort of stuff. Now, there's two in particular things that you're really interested if you're an investor. One is the returns that you think you're going to get, and secondly, how much risk are you going to take to get those returns? Now, if we look, just see if I can get to this place first. Here's the New Zealand stock market. Now, over here, oh, it's not very clear. Anyway, over here, this thing here, this is the recent announcements. So as companies have announcements that they want to provide to the market, and these are often required either by the regulations of the market itself, or there may be legal requirements to do this. This comes up to the market, goes on their website, and then you can have access to it. Now, this one down here, with a nice bright P, red P beside it, that particular one there, it's Comvita. They're making an announcement to the market, and it's marked with a P because they think that particular announcement has implications for their price. And so all that other stuff is probably all relevant. It's particularly nice, one of the nice red Ps are the one that you're really interested in as an investor, because this one has some impact on the value of the company, either what your returns are going to be, or something about the risk of it. And as an investor, you want to get this in a timely fashion so that you can value the security, you can make this informed decision about whether to buy or whether to sell Comvita stock, if you want to do either one of them. And so we want our markets to do this, and because we don't want, one thing we definitely don't want is we do not want either the sellers or the buyers to have a systematic advantage over the other ones. We want those prices to be fair, because if it's systematically in favor of one or the other, people get disgusted and they go away and they don't participate. And that's bad for the markets, and it's bad for the economy. Right, so moving on. A couple other things there. The credit rating agencies, we'll talk about this in the bond section, but they collect confidential information from bond issuers, and they summarize that information and release it to the market. And they form a very critical part of informing the bond market about the creditworthiness of the bonds. If you go into a bank, as say as you're an individual and you want to get a loan, they don't just give you a loan. You provide all sorts of information to the bank, and the bank then does a credit analysis on you, decides whether you can have a mortgage or not. So it's critical to get these, particularly for the investor, making an informed decision. Now, in the financial system and in life in general, there's lots of risks. This is just a few of them. A default risk. This is if you make a loan, it's a chance that they might not pay your interest as they're supposed to, or they may not even pay you back. That sort of a risk is called default risk. Problems there with adverse security price movements. If you buy stock and your stock goes down, you lose value, and that's a normal part of the stock market. The last one there, fire is a different type of risk. So if you think about the first two, the default risk and the adverse security price movement, they are financial risks. And the top one, you can only lose. Okay, your system can go along, and either they pay you as they're supposed to, and everything goes fine, or if you get a default, you don't get what you're supposed to. The second one, security price movements, they can move in your favor, or they can go down. So you have two things. You can actually make money, or you can lose money with those. The last one's a little bit different. The fire one is what we call a pure risk. And so the top two, the risks associated with those are financial risks, and the instruments that we have for dealing with financial risks are called derivatives, and we'll talk about derivatives when we get to that particular market. For things like fire, which is what's called a pure risk, and that means either things come out normal and like they're supposed to, nothing happens, that's fine, or you get a fire and you get a big disaster. That's what's called a pure risk, and there's an entire industry built around that, and that's the insurance industry. And the last third of the course, we'll talk about insurance. So what's this one here? If you've done some other economics, what's the principal agent problem? It's on page 10 of the textbook, but anyway, if you met it in other economics courses, what's the principal agent problem? Go ahead.
When the incentives of the two parties, the principal and the agent, are not aligned. So the principal would be the person investing money, the agent might be the person managing that investment or something. And the manager might want to make as much money as he can because he has a bonus or something, whereas the principal would want to essentially generate the best long-term return rather than just those that are silly in the short term.
Okay, yeah, that's exactly what it is. So I'll just flip over my slide to the next page here. So if you think of this like, if you take an example of buying stock, you're buying an ownership share in a company. And so the owners are the principals. Okay, so if you own shares of the company, you're a principal. Now, typically you don't manage your company. You've got employees that do that. You've got a board of directors. You've got a chairman and all this sort of stuff, and they manage it. And they're the agents. Okay, supposedly they work for you, but often you'll find, like was said, that what you want as the owner and what the agent wants as the employees is quite different. And particularly, the agents would like to get lots of pay. You'd like to get lots of return as an owner. And so the incentives are not aligned. And so what's good for one's not good for the other. Now, the question is, bottom of there, how bad can this get? How bad can this problem get? If these incentives are not lined up, and in many cases they're not, how bad can this problem get? Any ideas? No? Okay. No? Well, it can get bad enough to basically take down the entire financial system. It can. Now, before the financial crisis, there were actually studies done on what was going on in Great Britain, and it was claimed there in the banking sector that the agents were capturing about 80% of the returns that should have gone to the principals. And so, what put in more layman's terms, the fat cats with their big bonuses were taking the profits that should have been paid out as dividends. And the estimate was, you can argue about whether the estimate is right or not, but the estimate was that the managers were getting about 80% of the profits that really should have gone to the shareholders. Now, how bad can it get? Alan Greenspan was, for 14 years, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, that's the U.S. Central Bank, and he was called before Congressional Committee to testify after the financial crisis about why on earth did things go wrong. And this is what he had to say. I made a mistake. Sorry. Actually, he probably didn't say that. But he said he made a mistake. I made a mistake, which is unusual in that sort of line of work. But anyway, I made a mistake in presuming that the self-interest of organizations, specifically banks, is such that they were best capable of protecting shareholders and the equities in the firms. So he thought that the system that we had was perfectly fine for protecting the interests of the owners of those banks. I discovered a flaw in the model that I perceived as a critical functioning structure that defines how the world works. Basically, that financial crisis came out for him completely unexpected because he thought the system we had in place would protect people. It didn't. And you can't say he was a dumb boy, Alan Greenspan is not a dumb boy. He's not inexperienced. He was a very, very intelligent man, highly experienced, knew his job well, but he did not see this coming. And what it was is the principal agent problem. The people who were the managers, they captured an awful lot of money for themselves. They took risks that they should not have taken, and eventually destroyed an awful lot of wealth for the shareholders and for the wider public. So the principal agent problem can get really serious if it's not managed properly. Okay, any questions on that before we go to this next question? Sorry, somebody said something. Was there a question? No. Okay. Okay, so here's 3 types of efficiencies, and these are essentially a wish list, the things we would like our markets to do for us. We'd like them to be allocationally efficient, informationally efficient, and operationally efficient. So what are these things? First one up, allocationally efficient. Now, I've actually talked about that already. didn't really remember what it was. Go ahead.
We have resources that are allocated to when they can generate their return.
Okay, so it's basically allocating the resources that we have to the areas that give the best return. If you think about the financial system, there is a finite amount of capital to go around. There's a lot of people out there, a lot of corporations, a lot of governments who want to borrow. And what we would like our financial system to do is help us to figure out where is going to give us the best return. Which particular lot of all these people that want money, which one will generate the best return for not only for us, but for society as a whole. What about the next one? Informationally efficient. This is a wish one. Go ahead.
One is about allocating the right information to the right people so that you don't have, so that the organizations don't lack information, but also on excess of unused information.
So you think it's about actually allocating the information to different parties? Okay. Sorry to say, that's not what we want. I mean, I understand why you would say that, but anyway, okay. Anyone else? What would we think about when we think about informationally efficient? What are we talking about? Go ahead. That's a key point, that you want all parties to have the same amount of information, the same type of information. And that's like why these things, announcement goes up on the websites of like, stock market. But once it's there, what do you want to happen as a consequence of that, information? Say, for example, that ComVito announcement, that nice red P thing, is come to the market. What do you want that information to do? Or what do you want to happen to that information? Okay, you want to make an informed decision, which means what? Oh, do you want to have a go? Okay, you want it to be as freely available and as widely available as possible. That's definitely what we need. But once you've got, let's say, for example, let's say like with that, that red P thing's turned up and you've seen it. Okay, that red P thing's for ComVito has turned up, you've seen it. What do you want to happen with that information in terms of our market? That'll make it nice, informationally efficient. You want the prices to reflect it. That right? Mm-hmm. That's what you want to do, okay? That announcement said that it would have some bearing on the value, i.e. the price of that particular security. What you want is when that information comes out, you want it to be very quickly incorporated correctly into the price. Now, this is a bit of a wish list because this doesn't always happen. But if we're thinking about what we're, the top one there, the allocationally efficient, we want to be able to put our money to the best use. What we really want is that the prices that we see to be correct. And that means taking all the information that we have and we want it to be efficiently incorporated into that price. Okay? And what we need is that to be widely spread so that lots of people, financial analysts, investors, have that information. They can think about it. They can make decisions about that price. But we want that information to be correctly incorporated into the price. And we want it done quickly. We don't want it to be, take a while to get in there. Otherwise, the price in the market may not reflect true value, and that would give us a wrong incentive in terms of our investing. Okay, what about the other one? Operational efficiency. What's that? Why would we want it? Go ahead.
Costs?
What sort of costs?
Sorry?
What sort of costs?
Like general expenses?
In transactions? Yeah. Okay, so one of the things we don't want our financial system to do, we don't want the financial system to siphon off a lot of money in terms of transaction costs. We want that to go through quickly, some speed. But particularly, we want these things to run with a minimum amount of cost. And so, again, a bit of a wish list because the people who work in the financial sector, this is how they make the money, and so they want to push those fees up. But we would like it to not draw off a lot of productive investment into itself. We want it to go at low cost. So, yep, said all that stuff. Transferring funds. Okay. So referring to the next slide, describe direct and indirect financing, give us an example of each. So this is like the diagram we had before, except we've got an extra piece in there. The piece that we didn't have the time before is the financial intermediaries. So what are financial intermediaries, and how do they work in the financial system? Can anyone give me an example of a type of financial intermediary that you've come across in your life? A bank. What's that? A broker. They work in the financial market, so they're up in the top part, the brokers. But a bank, I heard bank several times, a bank is a definitely good example of financial intermediaries. Now, we talked about how money moves in that top ones. We talked about bonds and stocks. How does money get from the surplus people over to deficit people through a financial intermediary like a bank? What actually happens there? How does that money go? Yeah.
So we save money at the bank, and then they use that money to give it to other people, or like loan it to other people, the money that we saved.
Okay, so you put money in a bank. Say you take out a term deposit. Good example. And who would they loan it to?
They loan it to someone like would apply either for a mortgage or like an investment loan or something, and then that money would get used for that, but they charge it out at a higher rate than they give you for saving.
Okay, so they definitely have a markup in their interest rate. So this is quite an important function of the system, because if you think about on this side over here, say somebody's taking out a 25-year mortgage, and let's say you put in a 6-month term deposit, they may take your money and pop up a bunch of other people's money and make a 25-year loan over the other side. Okay, so what happens if you take your money away after 6 months?
Replace it with other people's money, or they'd use the money that the firm was paying back to fund other things.
Okay, so the borrower will pay interest and they'll probably pay some principal, so that's going to come in. But if you take your money away, what they'll likely do is replace it with someone else's money. And so what happens there is that there's this long-term problem, is that a lot of people wouldn't, if left to their own device, they would not invest in a 25-year mortgage. They just wouldn't do it. Too long. But you've got a financial intermediary like a bank sitting in the middle that can make a 25-year loan on one side, and it can manage all the business of deposits coming out, people put a term deposit in, people take a term deposit out, replacing it, all that management stuff. The intermediate handles all that sort of stuff. So let's consider the difference between two types of intermediaries. We're going to take a bank, and we're going to take a KiwiSaver fund. How many people got KiwiSavers? Lots. Good. Okay. So if the mortgage person stopped paying, who loses money?
The intermediary.
Yeah, in this case, the intermediary, in the case of the bank, if the mortgage person stops paying, bank loses the money. Now, if it's your KiwiSaver, and say they bought some stock and poor little company went broke, who loses the money? You do. Okay? So not all financial intermediaries are created equal. There are different risks with different ones. And as investors, you've got to be aware of what your risks are. Okay. The direct, we've talked about direct, basically, if an example, say, Auckland International Airport is raising money through a bond issue, and you invest in that, then the money goes directly to them, and at the end, there's no intermediary. It's just you and International Airport. And those things, when we make those things, they're called financial assets. So things like money market securities, of which there's a wide range, bonds, shares, they're all financial assets. So if you hold them, to you, it is an asset. Okay. In terms of the functioning of the markets, the two main operators there in these markets are the brokers and the dealers. I explained the role of a broker, then we'll explain the role of the dealer, and ask the question, how on earth do they make their money? So what's the role of a broker in a financial market? What sort of markets do they work in? Yeah, go ahead.
To arrange transactions. So if you would wanted to sell shares, then you would go to a broker, and they would go find someone to buy those shares.
Okay, so the broker just simply provides a service. You want to either buy or sell, or you tell the broker what you want, and the broker goes away and finds someone else to transact with. And how do they make the money doing that? Yeah. It's basically a fee for service. Typically, that is called a commission. Typically, it's on a percentage of the value of the trade. So that's how a broker makes their money. What about a dealer? How does a dealer work in the financial market? Okay, so if you're going to sell it, they actually buy it from you. Yeah, they own it. So in the broker never owns the securities that are being traded. The dealer does. So if you sell your securities, the dealer buys that security, pays you the money, and they put it in the inventory, and hopefully they'll sell it on someone else. Okay, so how do they make the money? How do they make the living doing that? Okay, you buy high.
What they order. So they'll buy it for, say, $2 and then try and sell it.
Oh, buy it for $2 and sell for $4. Oh, that sounds a good deal if you're a dealer. Yeah, okay. Basically, every dealer, they stand ready to buy and sell at any point, and they'll actually post their quotes. And basically, the money that they would pay to you to buy it off you is lower than what they would sell it to you. And, $2 and $4 is a big gap. But the basic idea is right, okay? And so if you went in to sell your shares, they'll have a price that they'll pay for it, and it's definitely lower than the price that they would, transact at. So they make their money on that difference between those things. It's called a bid-ask spread. That's how they make the money. Okay, we'll stop at this point. If you want to ask any questions, I'll be around for a few minutes, and we'll pick up at this point tomorrow and finish it off.
Sorry, I actually missed the part. What did you say about this question again? You said you didn't agree. Did you say?
No, I don't think that's right. No, because a company.
Yeah.
We want. And if they were doing that, then ultimately they would go bankrupt. And so, if you're doing other finance courses, you'll come across the fact that many companies have debt as part of their capital structure, but they're not actually cash flow negative.
So you reckon that this DSU means deficit spending unit?
Yeah, that's what it's. Yeah.
What about this one? Demand of funds.
Yeah, that's.
It says according to this chart, it says demand of the funds. It's just short as DSUS as well.
Well, demanders are typically the deficit. You don't usually borrow money when you don't need it. Okay.
Yeah. I think that right now we're just got a little bit confused about what this stands for. DSU. What does it stand for? Is it stand for
deficit? Yeah, that's what.
Deficit,
yeah.
Or it stand for demand of funds?
Well, no, it stands for deficit spending unit, because that demanders of funds would be DOF.
Also, that I'm just there's another question for this dealer. Can you give us an example for the dealer?
Well, if you went to a bank and you say you had some foreign currency, and you wanted to get New Zealand dollars for it, the bank would buy that currency off you, and so the foreign exchange market is a financial market.
Yeah.
But the bank is a dealer in that market.
Okay, so actually they are at the bottom, are they? Intermediary. Apparently, if they're dealer, they own it.
No, dealers are up in here.
So, but apparently that you said you gave me an example that is a bank.
Yeah.
So they own the thing. They actually borrow the money from there, but the bank is the intermediary.
It depends on what market. If you're dealing with a mortgage market, typically a bank is an intermediary. Now, banks are such large things that you see they have many parts of them. And in the foreign exchange market,